Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a concept that's an absolute game changer. Strategy beats exhaustion. You know that feeling, right? Like you're sprinting on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up, but you're not actually getting anywhere? Well, today, we're going to look at the exact mechanics of how leverage and smart systems completely outpace pure, unadulterated effort. So let's just start with a really tough question. Have you ever felt like you're working way harder than literally everyone around you, but somehow you're still falling behind? I mean, maybe you're the very first person to log in, the last one to leave. You're completely trapped in this pervasive grind culture, grinding out 12-hour days, absolutely exhausting yourself, all while you watch a colleague who works a standard 6 or 8-hour day get that promotion instead of you. It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? It's demoralizing, and honestly, it fundamentally breaks the number one rule we were all taught growing up, that hard work guarantees success. Look, if you're tired of being tired with literally nothing to show for it, the story we're unpacking today will absolutely change how you work forever. And hey, if you're feeling that deep, in-your-bones burnout right now, just know that it is incredibly valid. To understand exactly why we get stuck in this trap, our source material introduces us to a 32-year-old farmer named Thomas. Now, Thomas inherited a modest 10-acre farm, and his entire philosophy on life rested on one single pillar: hard work. He truly, deeply believed that suffering and massive physical effort were the only honest ways to make a living. But, as we're about to see, this deeply held belief almost cost him his life. Just look at the stark contrast between Thomas and his neighbor Richard. You've got Thomas, waking up at 4 in the morning, grinding out 15-hour days. He's literally planting seeds by hand, watering rows with a heavy bucket, pulling weeds all by himself. His hands are calloused and bleeding, and he's just so exhausted he can't even manage a proper dinner with his wife, Sarah. But then, think about Richard. Richard has the exact same sized farm, but he works from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's just 6 hours. He leverages modern systems, he actually hires seasonal help, and he spends his evenings relaxing and traveling with his family. Night and day, right? Now, you would naturally think, just based on the sheer volume of hours put in, that Thomas's crop yield would be totally off the charts. But it's actually the exact opposite. Thomas's massive volume of manual input completely fails to translate into proportional output. His crops are just average, his yields are mediocre, and he is constantly teetering on the edge of debt. Meanwhile, Richard puts in a fraction of the effort, yet his yield is literally double what Thomas produces. And this fact absolutely haunts Thomas. And then, a major crisis hits. A severe drought strikes the entire valley, making water incredibly scarce. Now, every single farmer is facing the exact same environmental challenge. But how does Thomas react? He doubles down on his deeply flawed hard work never fails mantra. He decides the only possible solution is to suffer even more, so he pushes his wake-up time back to 3 a.m. and starts making 50 grueling trips a day to a distant well, carrying water entirely by hand. His body is literally screaming in protest, but he just keeps telling himself that hard work is the answer. Which, as you might guess, brings us to an inevitable breaking point. On the 15th day of this absolutely brutal routine, while carrying his 40th bucket, Thomas's vision blurs. His legs give out, and he collapses right there in the dust between his dying crops. His wife Sarah is the one who finds him. And the doctor's verdict? It is chilling. He tells Thomas, "Your body is shutting down. You're dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and on the edge of a massive heart attack. If you continue like this, you won't see next harvest, because you'll be dead." Talk about a terrifying wake-up call. So there's Thomas, lying in bed, hooked up to IV fluids, feeling complete and utter defeat. But here's the thing. It isn't defeat from the drought. No, it's the terrifying realization that his entire work philosophy, this foundational belief that suffering equals success, might be completely wrong. He looks at Sarah and asks, "I worked harder than anyone. I sacrificed everything. Why am I failing?" And Sarah gently suggests that maybe, just maybe, hard work isn't the only answer. 3 days later, Thomas finally swallows his pride. He walks over to Richard's thriving, deeply green farm, knocks on a door, and asks the exact question we have all wanted to ask the highly successful people in our lives. He asks, how? How do you work half the time and produce double the results? And you got to admit, it takes a whole lot of humility to ask that question when you've built your entire identity around being the hardest worker in the room. Now, Richard doesn't just hand him a spreadsheet. Instead, he gives him an analogy, and it's a super powerful one. He says, imagine 2 woodcutters. The first guy swings an old, dull axe for 12 hours straight. He never stops, genuinely believing that pure, unrelenting effort means more chopped trees. But his axe just keeps bouncing off the bark. The second woodcutter, he works for only 10 hours. But every single hour, he stops for 10 minutes to sharpen his axe. By the end of the day, that second woodcutter cuts twice as much wood. Richard looks right at Thomas and says, "Thomas, you've been swinging a dull axe for years, wondering why your hands are bleeding, but the tree isn't falling." To really clarify what Richard is getting at here, we have to properly define smart work. It means creating maximum value and leverage through strategic systems and planning, rather than just relying on mere physical or mental suffering. Richard explains to Thomas that there is a massive, massive difference between motion and progress. Being busy is vastly different from being effective. Look, hard work is a foundation, for sure, but hard work without a strategy, that's just pointless suffering. Richard then takes Thomas on a walk through his farm, and he breaks his success down into 3 concrete, highly actionable principles: systems over effort, focus over hustle, and rest as strategy. Think of these principles as the ultimate escape route out of the exhaustion trap. So let's break each of these down so we can really understand how to apply them to our own lives, exactly like Thomas did. Okay, let's look at principle 1, systems over effort. Remember, Thomas was hauling water in heavy buckets for 6 grueling hours every single day. It was inefficient, it was backbreaking, and it wasted a ton of water. Richard, on the other hand, he spent a little money up front to install a completely automated drip irrigation pipeline. It delivers water directly to the roots with 0 waste, it runs during the cooler hours so nothing evaporates, and the best part? It does all of this while Richard is fast asleep. The takeaway here is simple: never do manually what technology and systems can automate for you. Moving on to principle 2, focus beats hustle. See, Thomas was trying to grow 5 entirely different crops. He was spreading his attention incredibly thin across all of them, and as a direct result, he was struggling everywhere, producing nothing but total mediocrity. But Richard looked closely at his soil, figured out what thrived best and what sold for the most money, and decided to master just 2 crops. By confidently ignoring the rest, he produced ultimate excellence. Mastery in a few key areas is always going to beat exhausted mediocrity spread across a dozen. And that brings us perfectly to principle 3. Now, Thomas honestly thought rest was a weakness, but because he was constantly running on fumes, he was making really expensive mistakes that ended up taking even more time to fix. Richard, meanwhile, gets 8 solid hours of sleep. He exercises, he takes actual breaks. Because his brain is fresh, he spots problems early, he innovates, and he makes significantly better decisions. We have to realize that rest is not the opposite of productivity. Actually, it's a critical, strategic component of it. Armed with all of this, Thomas goes home with his notebook and asks his wife to help him start thinking differently. And the very next day, Thomas executes what we'll call the pivot. This is amazing. He does something truly radical for him. He works for exactly 4 hours. And then, he just stops. He takes the entire rest of the day to research irrigation systems, talk to suppliers, and make a real, concrete plan. Within 2 weeks, he sells an old, unused tractor and buys a basic drip irrigation system. He boldly traded 10 hours of mindless physical labor for just a few hours of highly strategic planning. The absolute most fascinating takeaway from this whole pivot comes down to one single number: 20 minutes. After Thomas spent just 3 days installing that new irrigation system, his daily watering time plummeted from 6 agonizing, backbreaking hours a day down to just 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes. I mean, that is an almost unbelievable return on investment. A smart system completely replaced pure brute force. But the real magic here isn't just in saving the time itself, it's in what Thomas actually did with it. He engaged in what we call strategic reinvestment. He took those newly saved hours and used them to study his soil, analyze crop patterns, and actually plan out his farm's future instead of just constantly putting out fires. He also narrowed his crops down from 5 to 2, and crucially, he reclaimed his personal life. He finally got to have dinner with Sarah, he laughed, he actually had the energy to play with his kids, and he even started exercising. So, what was the ultimate result of this massive shift? Well, 6 months later, the next harvest arrived. By working just 7 highly strategic hours a day, instead of his usual 15 exhausting ones, Thomas's crop yield skyrocketed by 40% over his previous best year ever. Every single hour he worked was focused, it was intentional, and it was effective. His 7 hours produced massively more than his 15 hours ever could. Let's pull all of this together. Number 1, build systems instead of carrying buckets. Don't try to brute force a problem that a smart strategy can solve for you. Number 2, master a few things and confidently ignore the rest. Number 3, prioritize a rested mind. because a tired mind is incredibly expensive. And finally, strategy always beats exhaustion. As the source material beautifully reminds us, you are a brilliant human capable of incredible leverage, not a machine designed to be run until it breaks. I want to wrap up today's explainer by leaving you with a really actionable challenge. Take a close look at your work this week. What is the one single task you spend the most time on that you could optimize? Could you build a better system? Could you adopt a new piece of tech? Or maybe just delegate it entirely? I challenge you to take just one afternoon this week to stop swinging your dull axe, sit down, and finally sharpen it. Thank you so much for joining me today. And hey, remember, your very best work happens when your mind is sharp, not when your body is broken. Catch you next time.